French tanks are rather notorious for being rather odd compared to their contemporaries, and the ARL-44 is no different, being considered a rather bad tank for its time, which you're not wrong. But after researching it for the past 3 months, I think it's a misunderstood story, because considering what France was working with post-war, it's a miracle they were able to come out with this. With all that said, let's get right into it. In June of 1940, France died, suffering a terrible defeat to the Germans. This was bad for the many tank bureaus of France, with many like Renault, Saunois, Panhard, and Hotchkiss being directly seized by the Germans to maintain and modify existing French designs. But the Germans had little interest in developing and building new French tanks, leaving many bureaus like ARL alone. These bureaus were still forced to cease operation due to the terms of the armistice forbidding France from producing tanks, leaving many engineers jobless, and with factories unsupervised, some would decide screw it, we're doing it anyway, and would start work on clandestine tank designs to fight the Germans. Unorganized at first, these efforts would soon be bolstered by a secret Vichy army organization called Camouflage du Materiel, founded by Colonel Emile Mollard. This is where things get complicated for me because there is so much information I want to tell you, and for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it short and concise, only saying what I feel relevant. I will surely make videos on these other topics because there is little to nothing actually on them on YouTube, so stay tuned. In the late summer of 1940, with the assistance from elements of CDM, a shadow bureau of sorts was put together. We know very little about the structure of this bureau, but we know it contained engineers from the AMX and ARL state bureaus, as well as members from Saunois, with their most notable engineer being Maurice Lavarade, a chief engineer at ARL, who would soon be appointed as the head engineer of the project that would soon be known as the ARL-44. To summarize it quickly, the ARL-44 was an attempt to modernize the S-35/S-40 to create a rocket design to be mass-produced after the liberation of France, or optimally overseas in free French colonies or America if possible, to support free French troops. With a redesigned hull and a turret based off the ARL-3 design intended for the Charge E-1 before the war, it was to be armed with a 75mm that was to be developed by another bureau put together by CDM. What happened to the ARL-44 project was like many other secret projects of the time. All work was ceased after Case Anton, and the plans were hidden inside a mechanical workshop in Dijon, Burgundy, where they would survive the war. The ARL-44 was by far the most complete to come out of Maurice's bureau, but was not the only one. During this time, Maurice and his bureau were working on another design. Now, how far they got with it, we really don't know, but this design laid the groundwork for what would soon be the ARL-44 project. While the ARL-44 was a continuation of the S-35 lineage, Maurice based this design off the Char B-1, a project he had been a part of since the early 30s. With the liberation of Paris on August 26, 1944, and the re-establishment of the French government in the capital, tank research quickly resumed among the different bureaus, with the idea to develop a counter to Germany's heavy cats. Now, it was very clear in this time, French medium and light tank designs were heavily outdated, and even the ARL-44 provided no strategic advantage over the easily obtainable Sherman through the Lend-Lease program. Post Redyipyip here. Research is hard, and I found that the whole next segment was completely wrong. Basically, the guy I based it off of doesn't exist. Always fun when you find that out. Anyway, on October 9th, there are to be plans drafted for a 35-ton tank. Now, I can't say confidently for sure, but I assume this was signed off by the Minister of War at the time, Andrew de Thelm. Am I sure? No. Am I really sure about anything anymore? Not really. If I mistook a dude for not, if I somehow pieced together a dude that never existed, who knows anymore? Anyway, this is the best I can come out with. And on November 29th, the characteristics were approved, with full production to be established, with a production number of 500 tanks, with the first vehicles being ready by May of 1945, with plans for monthly production afterwards being 50 to 70 tanks. I recorded that like freaking 5 times now. If I sound rushed, that's because of it. Anyway, back to the video. This project was undertaken under the coordination of Defoe, where in 1945 it would reorganize into the Direction des Etudes et Fabrications d'Armement, or DEFA for short. DEFA was responsible for overseeing and coordinating the work on the ARL-44 project, splitting the work between multiple bureaus. The lead design bureau for the whole and overall integration was Artilleries de Construction de Roule, or ARL, under the supervision of the chief engineer of the project, Maurice Lavarade. The initial turret was to be designed and built by Artilleurs des Chantiers de la Loire (ACL), with Renault and Famha, mostly known as Saint-Chamond, were responsible for co-manufacturing of the hulls and final assembly, and the later plans for the 90mm and development of the new turret to house it were undertaken by Schneider. This shows how widespread the division of labor was for the ARL-44 and how it was truly a national project. With development moving along, it was soon decided by the French military that having a tank of this size only armed with a 75 was kind of pointless, offering no advantage over the Sherman. And on December 28, 1944, it was decided that 300 of the 500 tanks would be armed with the 90mm. This, of course, would push back the mass production date, being a whole new turret would need to be designed to house the new cannon, pushing back the date for the first 50 tanks, with them now being expected sometime in June of 45. With production of components planned to begin in February, with assembly starting in September, Renault would build 200 tanks and Famha would build 300. But due to the many setbacks and rapidly changing requirements through this time, production would continually be pushed back, not helped by the French military's insistence on up-armoring the hull from 60mm to 120mm in the front, arguing again that a tank of this size requires more armor. This decision, including the up-armoring and subsequent larger turret needed for said gun, caused the ARL-44's weight to balloon from a manageable 35 tons to a whopping 48. This would require a major redesign and strengthening of the suspension, and the need for a new engine since the Talbot would have no chance at reasonably powering it. Another thing to happen in this time was the surrender of Germany. With this, tanks were no longer urgently needed, and this was reflected on May 23rd when the French military, displeased with the pace of the project, would decrease the volume of their order from 500 to 150, and not 1 month later would again lower this number from 150 to the final number of 60 units, with the idea of the 75mm variant going out the window. Around this time, Renault finished a full-scale model, and work on the prototype was started, but was not complete until March 1st of 1946. It was built to the original specifications with the 75mm SAL-44 cannon and the original ACL cast turret, hence the name. The hull only had 60mm of armor, and it used the German Maybach 230 TRM engine with a mass of 43 tons. Hey, it's me again. I did not like how the ending turned out, so we're rolling it back. With everything set, production would start in June of 46, with all 60 hulls being completed by the end of 1947, where they were then placed in storage until the turrets could be developed. Also in 1947, the SA-45 started firing trials, where it would demonstrate superb accuracy, with it being comparable, if not better, than the German 88. With the cannon's specs being known, work on the turret commenced with a sufficient gun mount and recoil system being designed. It also featured a mechanized tray to assist the loader with loading. But due to the size of the SA-45, Schneider was unable to make a fully cast turret to house it. And with hardened steel hard to come by in this time, they used salvaged armored plates from the battleship Dunkirk. The front mantlet section was able to be casted while the rest of the turret was welded together. This gave the turret its boxy shape. Another big issue with the giant SA-45 and the turret was the weight. By using dense battleship armor, the turret would end up weighing around 21 tons, equating for nearly half the vehicle's weight. To power the turret, they used a Simca 5 car engine as an auxiliary motor to power the hydraulic pump. With all of this, it was not until 1949 that the turrets were able to be integrated with the hulls, and full testing could finally begin, where many deficiencies were found, including many issues with the gearbox and final drive, with the gearbox being prone to failure in rough conditions and regularly overheating. Many issues with its suspension were also noted, being that its vertical coil spring suspension system was heavily outdated and was never designed for a tank of this weight. It also inhibited the ARL-44's top speed and off-road ability. They tried to make up for these shortcomings with an efficient transmission, the trade off being that it created a lot of heat, requiring an absolute monster of a cooling system that would occasionally fail, leading to catastrophic overheating. Also, the ARL-44 would occasionally suffer from brake failure. Testing would continue until the summer of 1951, where in July, 10 ARL-44s would be assigned to the 503rd RCC to partake in the Bastille Day Parade. It was not until October that all 60 ARLs would enter full service with the 503rd, where they would have a rather unremarkable service life. They would prove mechanically unreliable, suffering from many of the same issues shown in testing, and in December they were temporarily removed from service to address all of the issues. But they would never be resolved, since in early 1952, the 503rd was equipped with American M47s, obtained through the Mutual Defense Assistance Act carried out by America for NATO members to strengthen their armies in light of the USSR's rapid military growth. Now, after studying the ARL 44 for the past couple of months, I can say I have an appreciation for the tank. While it may have sucked as an actual tank, the idea of it did more for France than the tank ever did. In the post war era, there was a major gap in French manufacturing due to the several years of being between being invaded and liberated, not to mention the bombings. They knew their tank technologies were several years behind, and tanks that could be made using existing production facilities would be severely outdated compared to those of the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. They would have to set the goal of completely localizing tank production and slowly closing the technological gap in the long run, with the priority being securing the professional manpower needed for development, because a major concern of this time was brain drain. If you do not give people a job, they will leave in search of other opportunities. And this expert workforce is something France could not afford to lose at this time. Reasons like this are why the ARL 44 project was so important to France. Less actually for the result, but the process of building and developing it. This taught the engineers and prepared them for future projects like the AMX 50 and eventual AMX 30. Well, that's ARL 44. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel and encourages me to make more of these. And if you didn't like the video and you think that I said something wrong, or you just have fun facts about tanks or other tanks, leave them in the comments. I'll gladly love to look over them. And if you got suggestions for next videos, future videos, I'd love to look them over. And I'd love, because this was a fun process, a long process. I spent more time on this video than the tank was actually in service, which is funny to me. But yeah, that's the video. So have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully.